For those of you who don't know me, hello, my name is Blimmel. I'm a rising senior at the University of Delaware. And my project with Cheer that I've been working on this past 6 weeks is called Missing Pieces. And I'm answering the question of, well, I'm attempting to answer the question of what role does storytelling play in disaster research, recovery, and resilience? So before I really dive into the material, I want to explain to you, I want to talk to you about my project format in case you're unfamiliar with it, because this is a little something we call a zine. It's not that complicated. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's short for magazine, but unlike one that's professionally printed, zines are self-made, self-distributed. They're entirely in a do-it-yourself format. The only rule is that there are no rules. It can look like whatever the creator wants it to, as you'll see with my zine. It's really just a snippet into my disorganized little brain. But it can be mixed media, it can be made digitally on paper. It can literally be whatever you want. Zines are rooted in accessibility, inclusivity, and creative expression. And with my project, I just thought that this was the best possible format for it. Just a foray into that format. But yeah. So a little bit more about me before we get started, introduce my name, but I have majors in environmental studies, and I'm also an environmental humanities and sociology minor. Some people are still kind of unsure about what environmental studies even is, what's environmental humanities. I'm still kind of unsure, but that's what I love about it, because it's just an interdisciplinary field, and it really allows me to explore all of my interests, one of which has been storytelling. So if you haven't deduced already, I'm very passionate about human dimensions of the environment. I've never been a woman in STEM. I've always thought in terms of people and voices and qualitative data. And with Cheer, I've been trying to translate this into a hazard context with hurricanes and coastal flooding. So of course, while traditional science and quantitative data are crucial in this field, this is by no means to say that they are not. My project is really trying to dive into the gaps that can occur when we only focus on the numbers and the models and the dollar signs. I'm somebody who tries to read between those lines, partly because I don't understand dollar signs and figures half the time. But I'm sure I'm not the only person that thinks this way. So I wanted to kind of focus on this project for those of you who may be like me and are much more people-oriented. So yeah, in a disaster context, something to me, something was always missing, I felt. And I kind of think about it like a big jigsaw puzzle. So if you're a nerd like me and you love doing puzzles, you know the feeling of getting down to the last few pieces of a puzzle that's 500 pieces or 1,000 if you're crazy. I've never finished one of those ever. But you know the feeling of getting down to the last few pieces and it's almost complete. You've poured your blood, sweat, tears into this. You spent so much time and energy, and you can pretty much see the whole picture. You can make out what it's supposed to be, but there's still a few pieces missing, and it's not the same without them. So I want to ask you, are you somebody who would be satisfied with that? Would you say, okay, good enough, and you would walk away? Or would you kind of look for those last two pieces, whether they've fallen on the floor or they're in the box? You won't find them unless you look for them. So I ask you, would you look for them? I would. So that's what I've been trying to do with Cheer. It's luckily given me the opportunity to do so here in Eastern North Carolina. So once again, sorry, I have a very long introduction, but it's simply because with my project format, while also returning this back to the Cheer Hub, I wanted to return this work back to the community members we spoke with and the community leaders who may not be super familiar with all of this work. So just to give an introduction to that, but Cheer, or Coastal Hazards, Equity, Economic Prosperity, and Resilience Hub, we call it Cheer. It's a 5-year project funded by the National Science Foundation, and it's really interested in understanding how communities respond to disaster, how they make decisions about mitigation, preparation, recovery. So where I fit into all of this is I'm a summer scholar. For the last 6 weeks, I've been here in Greenville, which I very non-expertly tried to point out on the map. It's somewhere in that region. We're right here. But as you'll see throughout the pages I have, we traveled all over this region from the coast further west into Raleigh. What did I click?
You just go up that tab up there. You're good.
Technical difficulties.
There you go.
Yeah, we still see anything.
There you go.
Sorry, I was like extrapolating too much with my hands. I'm sure I clicked something. But yeah, we're based out of Greenville for 6 weeks. This is the last week of it, unfortunately, which is why I'm presenting to you now. But that's where I fit into all of this. But when I first started this journey, my project originally had an entirely different focus. So as I learned throughout our meetings and listening to all of the community leaders, I am somebody with many interests and very little self-control. So I'd be listening to everybody talk and I'd be like, "Ooh, that's interesting. That's interesting. I want to focus on this." I remember in the first or second week, I was talking to Megan Millay, and she was listening to me. At this point, I wasn't talking with her. I was probably talking at her. So thank you, Megan, for your patience and your understanding. But I was telling her all my ideas and I was super excited, and she says, "That's great. You just gave me about 5 different dissertation topics."
Yeah.
So thank you, Megan. I love you. Thank you for being my rock and my voice of reason. I have since
Such a nice model.
I have since tried to narrow down my topic a little bit. This blob down here is an accurate depiction of my brain in the early stages, literally a blob of things, of topics I wanted to explore individually, none of which I ended up actually like honing in on, but throughout this topic I have now, I've actually been able to touch on each of them in little ways. But 5 dissertation topics later, I finally arrived where I am now. So as on the title slide, my research question was, what role does storytelling play in disaster research, recovery, and resilience? But in other less jargony terms, I was really interested in what do we learn when we listen? I feel like a lot of times in qualitative data study or research, we just barrel in asking questions without listening first. And to me, it's you have to listen first before you know what you're going to be asking or what you should be asking. So my experience with cheer, I really wanted to just sit and listen like a sponge. I was kind of like a leech in all of the meetings, like just latching on to the questions my other scholars were asking and just like taking that all in. I was like a fly on the wall, but it's been a great experience. So let's begin. I lied, I have one more introduction slide, I forgot. So yeah, just a disclaimer or acknowledgement. While the zine is serving as my final product for the Cheer Summer Scholars, it feels wrong to say that this is solely my project. I made it, but not without the help of all of the amazing people we talked to. This is a full list of who we met with. If I forgot your name, feel free to yell at me. I will provide my email. But I am sincerely thankful for all of the insight, advice, memories that the people we spoke with were vulnerable enough to share with us. They trusted in us, and I am just, words cannot convey. So thank you all so much for allowing me to step into your world for a little bit. But yeah, so this zine does not cover all of these people. This zine is by no means exhaustive of this full 6-week experience, but think of it as like a little putting your toe into like the waters and stuff, and just like introduction to what's to come. So now we can actually start. First takeaway is that stories heal. Christy Kohlberg says, "I share my story 1,000,000 times a year so that they understand what I went through. Not because I want the pats on the back, but because I want them to understand that every hurricane survivor is going through those same things." I can't imagine starting this zine with anyone other than Christy Kohlberg. She is the director for Coastal Carolina, did I get that right? Yes, Coastal Carolina Disaster Zone Resiliency Agency. I get it confused because they used to be Craven County, but they've expanded to the entire region. They're actually hoping to expand to Jones County this year or next, I believe. But she is the director of CCDRA. She is also the director for North Carolina Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster, or NCVOAD. So needless to say, she is an incredibly busy one. But you would never guess it from having a conversation with her. She never lets it show, because when you're in front of her, she is listening. When you're in front of her, you are her responsibility. No matter what else. You're so good. You're so fine. You're a busy woman, just like Christy. But yeah, she's incredibly busy, but she doesn't let it show. She gives you her full time and attention no matter what is on her plate. So a little bit more about CCDRA, because she juggles both this and NC VOAD, but we met with her in the CCDRA context. It's a nonprofit created by the community for the community. It was actually started by Pastor John Robinson, who was so kind to give us some of his time as well in the meeting. So since its inception 9 years ago, following Hurricane Matthew, they've served 1,900 families through construction, case management, as well as emotional and spiritual support, which is a really important and unique aspect of CCDRA. And Christy has been a part of this since 2019, and she draws upon her own story to help others. For the next few slides, I may read some of it word for word, because the stories I'm sharing, I'm quoting people directly because it feels wrong to try and break up what they told me and like paraphrase it. It's not my place to do that. I don't want to retell the stories, but simply share them. I want to serve as a conduit for like, oh, they told me this, but I'm not editing it at all. I'm not changing it. I'm simply putting it out into the world for other people to see. So I will. The following slides are not me speaking. It's not my voice, but the voices of the people we met with, which is what I wanted to do with this project. So Christy's story. Christy says, I lost my home in Hurricane Florence. That's why I got into disaster, because we didn't get help. And so I came in to tell everybody how they're doing it wrong. They're not serving the people. And I have, for the last 6 years, I've told everybody how they're doing it wrong. I won't read all of it for the sake of time, but when Christy and her family flooded, she decided to go be the change, not just talk about the change that is needed. Because to her, you can fix a home all day long, but if you're not helping that person, you're not making them resilient. Christy is somebody who focuses on her community and the people more than anything else. She doesn't care what the value of their home is. She doesn't care if they have flood insurance. She doesn't care about their legal status. If you are in Christy's community, you are her neighbor, you are her friend. So Christy didn't have flood insurance, so when she was impacted, she says, I didn't know who to call. We can't stop the storm from doing damage. We can try to minimize the damage, and we can try to make sure that they know where to go first and how to get the most help. When I asked Christy if she had a vision for her community, she responded that she wants everybody to have a better recovery than she did. And that is really her driving force behind what she does. I will read the quote in the middle here. Christy says, I had once picked up a pill bottle and I was going to down the pill bottle because we were in such tatter. We had just got a notice that we had to move our camper out of our driveway. And so now I was trying to figure out how am I going to pay the mortgage and now pay somebody for my camper to stay because my community will no longer let me have a camper in the driveway. And my husband was out in the backyard playing with our grandson, and I heard my grandson laugh, and I put the pill bottle down. I share that story with every disaster professional, so they know that this isn't about numbers. This isn't about being able to say, we fixed 60 homes in this community. It's about those 60 homes had residents in them that may have been picking up pill bottles. And if you are too extensive in your work and not as extensive in your work on the person, then you're doing nobody a favor. And I just thought that was incredibly powerful. No words needed for me to explain why. But Christy is somebody who knows how to really connect with the community, which is another role stories play. But we'll move on. So Jason Frederick says, you plant that seed and you treat it as your own. I don't want to sound cliche, but you treat them like family. And whether Jason Frederick knows it or not, that man is a storyteller at heart. This was a 2-hour conversation, and I remember we could ask him just one question and he'd go off on so many tangents, and they were all lovely. So he has so much compassion for his community, as does his partner in crime, Chad Strawn. But they have different strengths. Jason's very imaginative and can go off on tangents and tell many different stories, whereas Chad is very much like grounded in his responses. And this is not to say that Jason's not experienced or Chad is not compassionate, but they have different strengths and they balance each other out, like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich if it were planning. So they both have years of experience in local government, Chad for 21 years and Jason for 20. So you can imagine from that, they had plenty of things to tell us, which I've tried to squeeze in these pages, and I challenge you to keep track of how many times I quote Jason Frederick. We're already at 2. So he says, every storm is like a thumbprint, it's very unique. Sometimes the ultimate teacher is the storm itself. So what are some things he's learned? Jason says, the one thing you always have to remember, if it's home elevation, acquisitions, or any type of those, it's not a structure, it's a home. It's somebody's home. I felt it best to never be afraid to go inside. If you're invited in, go in and sit down and talk to them. Take the time. In my mind, I know I have 50 other places I need to be, and the state gives me 2 weeks to do it. But when you're talking in somebody's home, it's just different. And this quote here, I need to stop reading as much because I'm worried about time. But this quote here, Jason is alluding to maybe some state workers and federal workers who may not have the capacity or the bandwidth to meet with their community one-on-one. And that's understandable. It's their job, and they have to do it. But it's very different on a local level. To Jason, it's not just a job, it's his community, it's his neighbors, it's his home, and it informs everything he does. So one story he's learned from his home in New Bern. He says, I'll never forget the story of a gentleman that lived out on River Road. This was Hurricane Matthew. Raleigh had so much water, we flooded a week, 7, 8, 9 days later. And he was telling me about how Floyd was another one. Back in '99, East Carolina was flooded out. So they would say, at night, they could hear the river coming. How eerie is that? They could hear the river coming to them, and they were as serious as a heart attack. And within an hour, he had water at the last step to his house. In 1 hour before they had to evacuate. And as fast as water comes in, water will leave quick too. Once the event happens, the damage is done, but sometimes the water likes to stay around. And I think we very much can compare water sticking around to some of the emotional impacts as well, like Emma was talking about in her presentation. The storm comes and goes, but the impacts are here to stay. So, stories also teach. And here we come to National Weather Service. We will teleport to Newport. I really like that one. So everybody has a local weather person, whether you tune into them or not. I know Michelle does. And I do as well. But for those of us who do tune in, if you're anything like me, you may have wondered, how are they so energetic all the time? How are they so charismatic? But lucky for you, I've discovered the answer. It's simple. They love their job. This much is apparent as soon as you meet Eric Hedden and Ryan Ellis from the Newport National Weather Service. Eric is the warning coordination meteorologist, and Ryan is the science operations officer, but beyond these super cool job titles, they do a heck of a ton else. As Eric likes to say, 15% of their job is only forecasting, whereas the remaining 85% is the fun stuff, which entails community outreach, education, really getting stories from the community. Eric had so much to say, which I will try to squeeze in a little bit. But one thing that really stood out to me was the hurricane talks that they're doing. And these have been part of the National Weather Service for a very long time. But in recent years, they've been trying to gear it more towards the community. So as well as the time frame they've been doing it. So instead of just doing it in May and being reactionary, we started doing ones that were aimed at the community. So in the past, it was really just for emergency managers before hurricane season even started. But starting in 2019, they've really expanded and branched out to have these talks for the community as well, and hold them throughout the entirety of the hurricane season in order to reach as many people as possible. And this stood out to me because it is a great space to get stories from the community, hear what matters to them, hear what's happened to them, their local knowledge and their lived experiences. So he's learned some things from all of the hurricane talks he does. Eric is incredibly active in the community. He says these forums are not just about the presentation, it's about the interaction with the community. There are some challenges with large turnover. North Carolina, especially in the coastal areas, can have a very significant population of like new residents who maybe have never experienced a hurricane before in their lives. And these hurricane talks are a great way to get them exposed to it. But there are still challenges with turnout or complacency of people not showing up, especially sometimes when it gets to be, we're 6 years out from the last like extremely major hurricane and people are starting to get comfortable. So there are still some challenges that Eric is questioning, such as how can we reach our whole community? How can we convince people that you should be paying attention to this? But in terms of the people that do show up, I was very curious and I asked if they usually find that people are eager to share their experiences, to which Ryan responded, they'll do it before you're even setting up.
Yep.
They're coming in telling the stories. And they specifically said, for instance, if the talk starts at 7, they'll get there at like 5:30 just to set up so they're ready when people come in. So they're not like multitasking, like setting up audio while people are telling their stories. They're on top of it. They come in early, set up just so they can be there and be present with the community when they're coming in because they come in ready to share. These people want to share their stories. We just need to open the door for them to do so. King Talks are a place to do that. So I won't read everything, but yeah, they've learned some lessons, they've heard some stories, and it really adds a new perspective to things that aren't necessarily in their lane because while they are super active in the community, everyone's experience is different and they can't know everything all the time, but they can learn from listening. At the end of the day, we're all human, and I think that's one of the best ways to connect to people, says Eric. And lastly, stories and power. So now we go to Beaufort. So if you've ever wanted to experience the charm of a coastal North Carolina town, look no further. Our time there was very limited. We only spent about a day, but in that time I was lucky enough to experience the beautiful waterfront, the amazing food, the cozy shops, the active community. But if you're not convinced on moving there already, let me give you the cherry on top. They have an amazingly talented and caring team of town planners. Matt Zapp, the town manager, Elizabeth Lewis, the assistant town manager, and Rachel Johnson, the public information officer, are incredible. They're an amazing team. And while Matt himself has only been in Beaufort for a few months, you would never guess it from the way he talks about his community. And maybe it's just the job because before Beaufort, he has been in local government for over 20 years, but I think it goes beyond his training, and I think his compassion just comes from who he is as a person. That's something that can't be learned. So same could be said for Elizabeth and Rachel, of course, but they as well have also learned a ton of things. And I did want to mention Mayor Sharon Harker on the side. She was not a part of our first meeting, but we had the opportunity to meet her in a Board of Commissioners meeting, and she is a fantastic woman. And Matt had to say that she is the caregiver to our community that may be potentially underserved. She wants us to consider a public information push called Porch Conversations. She wants to take our video team potentially to these front porches and have conversations with the maybe underheard portion of Beaufort and share their stories and talk about it. And I thought this was a super cool initiative that I'm really excited about, and that was really cool to hear. So I wanted to share it in case anyone else wants to implement that. I don't think they've started it yet, but it's really cool. So Matt and Rachel have some stories of their own. I will read this one. Matt says, having lived through Dorian, which was September of 2019, the mayor and manager here at the time had recently lived through Florence, and they were very adamant with the county about the evacuation process. We heeded that warning in Emerald Isle, where Matt was at the time, in September of 2019, and did a 72-hour pre-notice evacuation. All but one group of people evacuated in Trailer Park. The waterspout turned into a tornado and took out 63 homes in a row. No one died, thankfully, but the last 2 people that were left was a couple post 65. And she had her husband, who's not in the most, he was trying to load as fast as he could. He was getting all the pictures of their kids into the car. And she wanted a cup, I think it was a Keurig. She was making a cup of coffee to evacuate. And when it hit, they were in the trailer, and it took and dominated all of them. Squished them in and crushed their car in between. They survived. So Rachel clarifies that this tornado came about 6 to 8 hours before the heart of the storm was actually supposed to come. So folks thought that they still had time to finish those last minute things. And that's where the messaging gets really important. It was definitely super early compared to what everybody thought. So now you have a sense of panic in folks, right? If this already happened at 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. is when it's really going to get bad, and oops, I'm not gone, people are now panicking, and there's a whole other situation that can arise from that. And what we've seen with storms too, and the Weather Service is even working on their message, is not to necessarily look at the category. You got to look at what quadrant you're on of the storm, the wind speeds, how fast the whole storm is moving. If it's going to be slow and sit and rain on you for days, it could be a tropical storm, and you could have more damage than if it was something in a category 3 that just blew through quick. So this story really raised some questions for me. It made me question, what do people stay behind for? What's worth risking your life to save, whether it's pictures of your kids or like just a cup of coffee? What is worth it to risk your life? And then with Rachel's clarification, what messaging do people respond to? How are warnings perceived and understood? Another story from Matt that I will read because it is incredibly powerful. Matt says he was dispatched to Helene in the aftermath, Western North Carolina. So he says, I think I was there from day 11 to day 18 or day 18 to day 25. I can't recall. It was all a blur. We went to Old Fort, North Carolina. 90% of the community was lost. There was a house that the entire house washed away. The husband survived, the wife did not. She was a 3rd grade or 4th grade school teacher to superproof their house. They didn't live in that area, but they came to check their mountain home, their second home. They're getting ready to retire. They're 24 months out of retirement. I think she had 28 years in the school system. So they were asleep, heard the rain, they woke up. Now, keep in mind the rain had stopped, but the river was rising. So unless you're connected, again, this comes back to communications, the ability to get either a code red or a systems alert, right? So they were in their bedroom. He comes out, he saw the water was close to their porch, and he hollered at her, said, "We've got to go." And when he said, "We gotta go," she was getting dressed. The whole house picked up and washed out down the river. The last thing they saw was the two of them were on their queen or king. They were holding onto the mattress and they got separated, and he watched her wash away. He got rescued and he refused to leave the site till they found her body. So if this doesn't communicate, I don't know what will. That stories of power, no explanation needed, no elaboration. This story in and of itself, I think, is more than enough to communicate risk of hurricanes and what can happen. And I think it's a way to reach people when numbers and data may fail, because who is not moved by this? But yeah, in conclusion, stories heal, empower, connect, and teach. I've included some quotes from people who I did not focus on, but are equally as important. Bella Sardina says, if you have topics that are emotional, you have to find a connection, and storytelling is just the absolute best way to do it. Steve McGugan says, you got to be ready to sit down and listen to somebody for 15 or 20 minutes before you can even get to the actual application for mitigation, because they're going to tell you their story. Trevor Barnett from Houston says, telling the stories is what's going to make the biggest difference for long-term recovery when it comes to helping people remember, but it also helps us recover. And Tinker Miller says, it is important to tell our stories because we want to continue to work. It brings in funding, it brings in resources. Another thing I won't mention, I didn't include it here, but that just reminded me, going back to Christy a little bit, at the end of our meeting, Christy told me that she just recently got her biggest grant ever, $300,000 from Verizon. And a little story about how she got that grant. She was at a conference or a meeting, and she was telling people about real long-term recovery. She told her story as is. And after the meeting, a representative from Verizon came up to her. She had her name circled, starred, and she was like tapping at it. And she's like, I want to talk to you. And they stayed in contact, and the representative told Christy to apply for, I believe at first, just a $250,000 grant. So Christy did. And then the representative comes back and she's like, up it to $300,000. So Christy did, and they got that money. And that just came from how moved the Verizon representative was from what Christy had to say. And so if that doesn't show the power of stories, then hopefully some other of these pages did. But the end not quite. So while the zine is coming to a close, this is only the very beginning of the work, and I plan to continue this project in the future. And it's a great hope of mine that future summer scholars will as well, because Cheer is in the third year right now, I believe. So there are people to come after me. And it'd be an honor for them to pick up where I left off. Not that I'm leaving off. I'm gonna keep working on this, but these 6 weeks in North Carolina felt like both a lifetime and a fleeting moment. That I feel like I grew so much in this time that I don't even know what to do with all of it. But at the same time, this is barely scratching the surface of what there is. So it's like I'm overwhelmed and like I've barely even started like all at the same time. So yeah, next steps, future cohorts, hopefully. I've kind of bolded some things that stood out to me, recurring challenges, common themes that may guide future research. If you wanted to hone in on certain things such as gaps in social networks, who knows each other, who talks to each other, identification of gatekeepers to reach difficult, hard to reach populations, lack of funding and staffing. That's one of the biggest barriers and challenges that came up in these conversations. Limited capacity for outreach also ties back into staffing. Complacency and low turnout, as I touched on with the National Weather Service and the hurricane talks, as well as building trust through longevity, such as planners like Chad and Jason or Matt, who have been in local government for over 20 years. That longevity is a way to build trust. So they're just some of my ideas if anyone wants to follow in the footsteps.